Hey everyone, today we have the week 2 update of patch 15.5. If you want to know all the new comps that have kind of been developed over the week and get to know how to play each and every comp in order to climb this weekend and on the rest of this patch, this is going to be the video for you. Starting out in the S tier, Star Guardians and Mighty Mech are by far the two best comps still. They decided not to nerf Jinx, oddly enough. Like, I thought there was going to be a B patch, but they said no, we're going to roll with this. So Jinx is OP, Tiny Team also OP, it's just another Jinx comp, and Mighty Mech also really good. So no matter what, try to go for Jinx if you can. If not, try for Mighty Mech. But if you don't get those, it's not the end of the world yet because there are a lot of good A tier comps. You just have to get good items for them. So that's going to include Kayle Reroll, Soul Fighter, Crew, Protector Kog'Maw, Executioner Akali, and Veteran Mentor Janna. And then some special mentions in the B tier are going to be Fast 9 Varus, build definitely possible. Ryze, still okay. Bastion, Xayah, still decent. Yuumi, still playable if you get a lot of AP. Luchador, Volibear, if you get a lot of melee items, he's going to work out really well. And lastly, Bastion, Yasuo. I think these are like the highlights of the B tier. The rest are just a bit more situational. But let's get into how to play each and every one of these comps. But we have 9 comps in the S and A tiers. Starting off with the S tier, let's talk about Star Guardian a little bit. So as I said last week, mana build's really good. So if you ever build a Spear of Shojin, it's going to work out really well for this comp. Spear of Shojin also works for the Mighty Mech build. It could be replaced for blue buff, but obviously when you do Mighty Mech, you want blue buff over the Spear of Shojin. But other comps this would kind of fit into. Soul Fighter can also use Spear of Shojin. Kog'Maw can use Spear of Shojin. There are a lot of different builds that can kind of use this. So if you get a tier early on in the game, it's going to be one of the best items to get. And if you have a sword, just slam the Shojin right away. If not, decide by stage 2 Carousel whether you want to slam the blue buff or the Shojin. It's going to depend on which comp you're trying to play. But apart from that, like just literally any items work for Jinx, i.e. Giant Slayer is a popular combo right now. You could go Kraken Slayer too because she gets some nice attack speed from her passive. Guard Breaker also works if you pair it with Infinity Edge. Like so many different things work on Jinx. For utility item holder, drop it on Xayah. Xayah is a great applier of that. Seraphine, great Thieves Glove holder. And then with Star Guardians, you always want to try, if possible, to play it with an emblem. So if you're on loot subscription, which often drops a spatula, you want to be trying to construct that emblem ASAP. You could put it on Kabuko or Cassante, doesn't really matter too much. And then Poppy's got some weird itemization, so most people build Poppy as like standard tank items, and there's nothing wrong with that. But honestly, the build that focuses on all the shielding items is much better. For example, you can see most things are averaging 4 point whatever, but Protector's Vow 3.83, Steric's Gauge 3.54, Crown Guard 3.78. And the reason why you want to do that is if you pair it with the power-up called Best Defense, Poppy becomes an absolute monster with these shield items. So definitely go for that if at all possible. If you can't get Best Defense for some reason, then sure, yeah, do the regular build of Warmogs, Bramble, Dragonclaw, whatever tank items you could get your hands on really, and go for that. But if you have Pandora's items or if you can handpick your items, then these are very good options to go for. And that's pretty much going to be that. After that, you want to do a Fast 8. That's going to work out best for this comp and get a lot of item and combat augments because this team just doesn't really need the econ as much as other teams because it's relatively cheap. And you stabilize pretty hard with Poppy 1, Jinx 1. But we covered this comp pretty extensively in the last video, so I also have a gameplay video that covers this. But it's an incredibly strong comp, and you want to be playing this in like probably at least 20% of your games, if not more. Next comp up we have is going to be Mighty Mech. Mighty Mech is another one of those comps where you could just spam it over and over and over. This one revolves around Karma. It's a little more niche because only really one player goes for this comp, whereas 2 players or 1.5 players go for Star Guardians. When you play Mighty Mech, it's really only from a Mighty Mech start. So if you start the game with Aatrox, Gangplank, Lucian, something like that, it's a very viable build to kind of go into later on. You could use Lucian as an item holder for Karma. That works out really well. And then you do main tank Jarvan, but he uses mana items, main damage dealer Karma, and then secondary damage dealer Yone. But this comp works best from a strong mech opener, or if you can get a lot of econ because you really need to get Yasuo. It's not really possible to get to 7 mech without him, so this comp really is dependent on win streaking in the early game or at least preserving life and then eventually getting Yone to really spike. So in the mid to late game, this comp is really good. Once you hit Yone, you start stabilizing really hard. But before that, you are a little weak. Like having Karma 2-star, yeah, it's enough for stage 4, but like come stage 5, it's going to be a little tricky if you don't have that Yone. So that's one thing you have to be careful about in this build. Another thing to keep in mind is that Karma's itemization is different than what it would be in 6 Sorcerer, because in Sorcerer you get a lot of ability power, but in Mighty Mech you don't. So while Jewel Gauntlet is needed in both comps, and same with blue buff, for third item I personally like the Death Cap because it adds a lot of AP that she's sorely lacking. But one other thing you could do is, if you have a Void Staff, you could build it on Karma first, and then you could build the Rabadon's Death Cap much later into the game, because obviously you don't have enough items to build everything you see on the screen here, because we have 11 items. Like, there aren't many games where you get 11 items, so if you do have a Void Staff and no Rabadons, you could just put it on your Karma. Other things you could go for is maybe a Giant Slayer, Gnasher's Tooth, even like a Morello can work, and also Striker's Flail works if you have the Jeweled Gauntlet. It actually is a pretty decent combo, but blue buff plus Jeweled Gauntlet, absolutely mandatory. The other ones you could kind of piece together if your build can handle it. For example, if you get like Water Lotus, then you don't need the Jeweled Gauntlet, right? So you could replace that for something else. Jarvan items pretty self-explanatory, just all the mana items, and then Yone, just standard frontline damage dealer melee items, and then utility on Senna. Pretty simple build, it's just really reliant around hitting Yone. Next build up we have is Tiny Team. This one you need the Tiny Team augment, but once you get it, it's super good because Jinx gets so much attack speed. So one build that is interesting to try out is the double Kraken Slayer build, because she just gets a lot of attack damage from that based off of the attack speed. And then Infinity Edge is Infinity Edge. It's just a very good item on Jinx because she does her big rocket and it just does a lot of damage in general. After that, Poppy, just the regular tank items will do. You don't need to do best defense in this build because you don't go full into Star Guardian, which gives her a lot of shielding. In this build, you just make her like a regular tank, and then you can secondary carry Varus later on. Don't play this unless you have the Tiny Team augment. This is an absolute requirement, and you also need a bunch of swords to play this build, because if not, it's a bit difficult to itemize both Jinx and Varus. Luckily, you can use Xayah as an item holder for Varus until you get him, so it's pretty easy to kind of ease into this comp. In the early game, you're just running Xayah, Rel, and whatever other Star Guardian you could get your hands on. Let's say you have Nico, you could pair the frontline tank synergies with random stuff, so for Bastions, that's going to be Garen, Xin Zhao, Swain, things like that. If you have Nico, you could add in protectors, such as Janna, Kennen, and maybe a Cassante. If you get this build, you're automatically going to gain LP, like assuming you get the augment, so take this very often if you can, and contest the Star Guardian players, you don't really care at all. Also, if you're going Star Guardians in the beginning of the game, you could easily pivot into this if you see the augment, because it is that good to play. Next build up we have is going to be the A tiers. Kayle reroll is pretty good. We're playing it with the Wraith build, and again with the A tiers, like if you meet a condition, you should go for it and stop chasing the S tier comps. I'm going to go over those conditions for every single comp. So for Kayle, if you ever get a lot of bows, this is something to consider, or if you just get a lot of Kayles in the early game, or if you have a lot of gold in the early game. So the reason why is because Kayle is very expensive, because you need to hit 3-star Kayle and also reach level 9. So if you have like 4 Kayles at stage 2-1, or even just 3 with good items being having like a bow and rod, it's going to be easy to go into this build because she's really reliant on attack speed. So if you get the red buff on her really quickly, like in the 6 Wraith comp, fights are pretty fast, so you just need instant attack speed, which is exactly what red buff gives, and then you blow through people decently quickly. Not like super quickly, but decently quickly. For power-ups on Kayle, you want over 9,000. If not, take something like Double Strike. Zac just wants regular tank ones, and same with Cassante if you end up getting him. The difference between Zac and Cassante is that if you are able to get Zac 3, and you only get Zac 3 if you hit it before Kayle, then you use him as your main tank. If not, you use Cassante 2-star, because he can hold his own pretty well because you are running protectors with Nico. Other signs to go for this build is if you get a very key artifact item, or even Radiant items, because Kayle uses Radiant items really well. But if you ever get Flicker Blade, or Static Shiv, or even Fishbones, you definitely can still go for this Kayle comp, and also just hard force it from that point. I'm not saying it's the best option for those artifact items, but it is one of the very good ones. So if you have any bit of a Kayle direction with those artifact items at the start of the game, definitely just hard force this, and you could forget about the S tiers. It's going to be better. One thing to keep in mind is that S tiers are good because you could play them in a lot of games and do fine, and they don't have crazy requirements. Like for the Star Guardian comp, like you could just go it. Like all the requirements down here, they're like more nice to haves rather than like absolutely mandatory. But for Kayle, like you do need a lot of Kayles to go for it. But if you get something like Flicker Blade and you have like 2 Kayles, just hard force it. You're not going to regret it. Next build up we have is going to be Soul Fighter, Samira, and Gwen. This comp is also reliant on hitting Gwen, but because you can build emblems, it's a bit easier to hit the legendaries compared to the Mighty Mech build. So if you get one of the Soul Fighter augments early game, such as tournament favorites or like an emblem, definitely go for this comp and hard force it because it's pretty easy to win streak with this build, I've noticed. Naafiri is just an absolute monster in the early game because Naafiri can both tank and DPS at the same time, can hold all sorts of different items, and is overall just a solid unit because you can pair it with Juggernauts. A lot of Juggernauts in the game. You have like Aatrox, who could also mesh with heavyweights. You have Mundo, which could pair with Gnar. Gnar can hold like your ranged items, and then Naafiri could hold your melee items. And then Mundo can hold the tank items. There's a lot of different things you could explore there. But the most important thing to hit is the 8 Soul Fighter power spike. If you can't get there, this comp is really, really difficult to play. But luckily, you're only going to go for this comp if you have a very strong Soul Fighter opener, which allows you to win streak. That way you could find Gwen, and if not, if you have an emblem, that's another time to go for this build. For power-ups, there's nothing really too complicated here. Samira, Gwen, and Set are going to be your 3 power-up holders. You only put it on Gwen once she's 2-starred, but for everyone else, I'm not really too picky on the power-ups. On Samira, like I prefer On the Edge, Attack Expert, and things like that, but on Set, literally like any tank one will do. It doesn't really matter that much. So save your power-up rerolls to get something really good on Gwen. But this is a very easy build to play. It's very trait-oriented, so any vertical comp that goes deep into a trait, generally pretty good for beginner players. Next build up we have is the Crew. This is like the beginner comp because it's so easy to play. You just play all the Crew units and play strategists to complement it. And when do you want to go for this one? Because again, we need to know when these comps are good compared to just hard forcing Jinx every single game. And the way you do this is if you have like 6 or more Crew units at stage 2-1, that's when I would consider going for this. Sometimes you might need like 7, but I'd say like 6 is a very safe point. If you're a bit lower rated, you could get away with 5 or even 4 units. And if you're a Crew master or a Crew one trick, because I know some people that do that, then you could put like -1 or -2 on that requirement. But I'd say for like a normal TFT player, maybe if you're around like Diamond 4-0 LP, like go this comp when you have maybe 6 or more copies of Crew units. And Crew, I'm talking about only Malphite and Sivir. Shen doesn't really count because all that matters is getting your first Crew unit to 3-star. After that, nothing else really matters. But it could be any combination. You could have like 4 Malphites, 2 Sivers. You could have like 5 Malphites, 1 Sivir. I guess if you have 5 Malphites specifically, like you could lower the requirement to 5. But if you have a mix of them, I'd say have 6 copies. Like if you have 3 and 3, that'd be good. If you have 3 and 2, you still could hard force it, but it is a bit risky and you just have to accept that risk before you go in. So what are some situations where you could justify that risk? Well, if you have good slammable items for the team comp, that's one thing to consider. For example, if you have a stone plate you could just slam right away, that's like Malphite's best item. If you get a power up on them, that's really, really good. So if you get like standalone or body change on Malphite, that's going to be really good. That way you don't have to use your rerolls. So if you're able to do any of that, then again, you could lower the requirement a little bit. But this comp's really easy to play because you just reroll pretty much the whole game. You even use your rolls to level up. Once you get everyone 3-star, the big power spike is getting Ziggs 3-star. That's where the team starts to really shine. One thing for Ziggs is that you need attack speed items on him. So don't be afraid to build Ziggs items on Sivir, have Sivir be an item holder for Ziggs, and then swap the items over later. If you have too many attack speed items, that's also a perfectly fine situation to be in because Ziggs and TF both use attack speed items. So whatever you build on Sivir, it's mainly for the early game. Obviously, like regular Sivir items would help you win streak more. So if you build like Shojin, i.e. Striker's Flail, that's probably Sivir's best build out of the normal items. But if you have like Rage Blade on her, if you have like red buff on her, like that's perfectly fine too, because you're gonna have a better late game when you do that. Pretty much just slam items. Like the only mandatory item I think in this whole team comp is having stone plate on Malphite. I'm pretty sure that's just by far his most important item. After that, like any random tank items on him will do, and any random backline damage items will do, and then you split it up and figure it out later. But all that really matters is getting your first Crew 3-star. After that, it's pretty much smooth sailing from there. Very easy comp to play. Next build up we have is Protector Kog'Maw. This comp got bumped up a bit. You just stack him and you just play a bunch of protectors. You could also play Bastion We could check out the data right now. We could put in Kog'Maw 3-star and then look at traits and then type in 6. Protector, Bastion, Heavyweights, Juggernaut, like they all work. Protector's the most popular version, but it really just depends on what you hit. So if you ever get a bunch of Kog'Maws early or a bunch of Lulus early and you're like, hey, I have some AP items or I have some tiers, like let's go Kog'Maw, you could line it up with any front line and you just play all of them and then you add in like a Ryze. But let's talk about Kog'Maw because artifact items bump this up a tier, and same with Radiance. So we go to items and then we go to Radiant items. You'll see that he normally averages like a 4.06, but with Radiance it goes to like 3.5 approximately. Obviously pick whatever he normally builds. And then if we go on to artifacts, we see some interesting stuff. I think Dawn Core is like absolutely bonkers on him because it just gets him to cast so often. I mean, he already casts so often, but this makes him cast even more often. And when you cast often, it makes Dawn Core even better because you reduce your max mana by 10%. So there's this huge snowball effect that happens. It's the same thing as building like a Rage Blade on him, essentially. It just makes him go ham like that much faster. Static Shiv is really good. Flicker Blade, I mean, he's attack speed based. That's pretty good. I've never tried Lichbane, but the data says it's good, so you might as well try it if you haven't already. And I'd also assume like Gambler's Blade is pretty good. Yeah, 3.9, pretty decent there. The other ones are like usable. So if you YOLO Artifact Anvil on stage 4, like 4-2, Portable Forge, I don't recommend doing that. I really only like Portable Forge on 2-1 or 3-2. But if you're one of those maniacs who takes it on 4-2, like there are a lot of options that are playable, but not all of them are like that great, you know, like only really like Dawn Core, Static Shift, Flicker Blade are like, I'd say that great. The rest, they're playable, but you probably would have wanted something else. But Kog'Maw is just so good. He goes infinite, and when you play this comp, you do 3-cost reroll. You could pop up this little drop down if you need a refresher on how to play 3-cost reroll, but you essentially just go for Kog'Maw and Nico 3 and go from there. Oh, I almost forgot power-ups. Like Caretakers and Fairy Tail are the two best ones for Kog'Maw. It's by far Caretakers, but if you get Fairy Tail, you want to focus even more on your front line. So I did a coaching video recently, you could check that out on my channel, where I look at someone's game where they play Kog'Maw and they made a huge mistake where they had Fairy Tail and they itemized their Kog'Maw, which is perfectly fine, and then they itemized their main tank, which is perfectly fine, but then they itemized their secondary backliner. I think they did Janna, and that's a big mistake because when you have Fairy Tail, you really just care about your frontline living because you have all the damage you need from Fairy Tail. You just need your frontline to live so that you could stack fairies. The way Fairy Tail works is that every time you cast, you summon 2 fairies and they just attack the enemy. And it's a very, very good effect. And since Kog'Maw casts so quickly, you get a billion fairies. So when that happens, you just want to spam frontline items. So just like buff up your Cassante, buff up your Nico, buff up Rakan, Malphite, Kennen, like any way you can. You just need as much frontline as possible after you get 3-item Kog'Maw. So when you do that, it just kind of activates your whole team. It's like having like a second Archangel on your team or something like that when you take Fairy Tail. So very fun power up to try if you haven't, but Caretakers is going to be the one you should fish for. Nico, she doesn't care about her power up. Just take whatever first option you can get and then use all your rerolls on Kog'Maw in order to get the Caretakers, because I think it is pretty hard to get percentage-wise. I forgot the exact percentages, but it's pretty low. But pretty simple build, 3-cost reroll. Go for it if you get an artifact or if you get like a bunch of Kog'Maws early. Next build up we have is going to be Executioner Akali. This build only works with best in slot Akali, and yes, Akali is back. You play her 3 Executioner, 3 Supreme Cell, 3 Mighty Mag, and go this weird horizontal comp. But oddly enough, her best in slot items are going to be Nashor's, Quicksilver. I have never seen this item combo in TFT before, but I promise you that it's good. Like, we could check it out right now. Teamfight.lol for all your data checking needs. Obviously, artifacts are pretty good on her, so Dawn Core is going to be the best one by far. Oddly enough, Zhonya's isn't that great. Honestly, I'd have no idea why. On paper, it sounds great, but I think it's because in her new build, she doesn't care about the invulnerability as much as she did in her old one, and she just cares about casting quickly. That's why Dawn Core is good, that's why Double Nashor's is good. So let's swap to normal items or all items, and you'll see that Nashor's Tooth, Quicksilver, Nashor's Tooth are the most popular builds. Like, You just need her to pop off and cast really quickly and cast uninterrupted, because when you have the Quicksilver, it's essentially like having an Edge of Night, right? Because Edge of Night, it de-aggroes, but she already de-aggroes from her ability. So if you have Quicksilver, which prevents her from being interrupted or stunned, you just pretty much always trigger your de-aggros. So she just goes crazy with the Nashor's Tooth, and then she attacks very quickly. Remember when people built Rageblade on Akali? Well, Nashor's Tooth is kind of the replacement to that, because you just want a lot of attack speed, and she gets it every time after she casts. So it's just a really weird item combination, and this is the only time you want to play this comp is if you can get best in slot Akali, which is this build. So unless you start the game off with 2 of these components, which are bow, belt, glove, and Negatron, don't attempt to go for this comp because it's not worth it otherwise. But Crimson Veil, also very good to run as a power-up because it gives her a lot of healing, and also she gets overhealing, so she becomes like this mega tank. Apart from that, like Cassante gonna be your other power-up holder. Just any tank item will do. Just any tank power-up will do. Any tank items will do on him as well. And then in the backline, you could run Ryze secondary carry, although it doesn't matter as much as you think. Another person you can itemize is also Jarvan with mana items, but this build is really weird. You could also go for like a bunch of other different builds with this. You don't have to go the same exact build, but essentially this comp is a low roll farmer, meaning you must come online early during stage 4 to abuse weaker opponents. By the way, this write-up, along with any write-up we saw on any of the previous comps or any of the comps in the future, all are going to be available on the website bunnymuffins.lol for free, so definitely check that out if you have not already. But another thing to keep in mind with this comp is positioning is key. So what is positioning? So you want Akali to either be here or over here. That way she hits the corner unit on either side in like most cases. People have to do some really weird positioning in order to avoid that. So until that happens, like most people don't position every turn. Just swap her and make sure that she hits the corner units. If people try to offset by going like this, then you could just move her to the middle and she'll go to the back there most of the time. But more often than not, people are going to be in the corners. So if you're over here, you jump to the Senna. If you're over there, it jumps to the Ryze. Just keep her in one of these 2 next to the middle spots. Honestly, it's really not too complicated. But this build is really flexible. It just really revolves around like Akali, Ryze, and Cassante and Jarvan. Those 4 are like the bread and butter. After that, you could add in whatever units you want. Just make sure you run at least 2 Supreme Cell, and ideally 1 other Protector so that Cassante is not useless. But next build up we have is going to be Veteran Mentor Janna. So Veteran is a power up that you could get which turns Janna into a mentor. So I believe there's other veteran units such as like Katarina. There's another one too, I forget the name of it. But essentially all you have to do with this build is get to 4 mentor, and it's really easy if you get the power up. So like this says 3 out of 4, but with Janna, with the power up, it becomes 4 out of 4. So for power ups, Veteran Janna, it's the only way to do it. And then Kabuko, best defense is really good, and body change is really good. So why is Veteran so good? It's because normally getting 4 mentor is pretty difficult because oftentimes you're in Ryze prison. But if you have the veteran buff, you don't need Ryze to get to 4 mentor. Obviously, you want him eventually, but you can play Yasuo, Udyr, and Kabuko instead until you get Ryze. So another thing you need to do is get pretty good econ because you want Kabuko and Janna 3 ideally during stage 4, and that's pretty hard to do. But if you do get it, this comp becomes really strong. If you ever get Radiant items, that's also another really good build. That's also another really good thing to have in this build because it's a very concentrated comp in terms of power. If you want to look at artifact items, pretty much any generic tank is really good on Kabuko. Horizon Focus is absolutely hilarious on 4-star on 4 mentor Kabuko because he stuns so often, so he gets a lot of triggers from this. Mana Zane on Janna is really good. Dawn Core is really good. A bunch of other stuff works, but like I'd just focus on the top ones there. After that, like Janna pretty much can use any AP items. Like you just need 1 mana item and the rest like AP. Like Archangels also works. You can build Giant Slayer, Nashers. Blue buff can be replaced by Shojin. Kabuko likes any tank item, but if you have best defense, then you obviously want the shield items to get the value from that. So it's Vow, Sterix, and Crown Guard. But if you do not have best defense because you use all your rerolls trying to get veteran maybe, then you can go for just regular tank items on Kabuko if you have one of the generic tank power-ups. But yeah, add strategists to this build. Whenever you run Ryze, you should pretty much always run Jarvan. Jarvan also gives strategists with Janna, so that becomes a really nice bonus. And then if you want, you could run Mighty Mech, because Aatrox works really well with both Udyr and Kabuko, so Aatrox is pretty much always run. So literally Jarvan, Aatrox, Udyr, Kabuko, Janna, and Ryze, those are always going to be in your comp. And then Senna's good to activate Mighty Mech, and also gives Executioner Ryze. In case you're ever wondering, like, oh, what are some random champions I can add? You could always just look on teamfight.lol and look at what's most popular. That doesn't mean you go for it every single game. It just shows some options for you to kind of add to your team. In this filter here, where in Diamond Plus, I have Janna 3 and Kabuko 3. But literally, these are just options. You could go for any of these. And obviously, it mainly depends on what units you're hitting that game. But that's going to be the A tier. In the B tier, like, yeah, this comp is doable if you get, like, a really good reroll augment, such as Prismatic Ticket or something like that. Then you could go for Shen and Xayah 3-star really, really easily. Next build up, we have Fast 9 Varus. If you get, like, a ton of gold from Gnar with Golden Edge, then you could go for this. Like, if you have Rageblade Gnar early, then this is going to be a very good comp. Like, it gets bumped up to, like, at least A+, especially if you're on a high econ portal. Next one up we have is Yuumi. If you have a lot of AP items and for some reason you need to go 4-cost units, Battle Academia Yuumi is the perfect comp to go for. It's like definitely still playable, it's just a bit more situational. Mentor Executioners, this one's okay. This is another AP comp, but I prefer the Yuumi one, but this is just another option. Luchador Volibear, if you get a lot of melee items, this is going to be really good. Or if you get one of the Luchador emblems, that's going to be awesome. This comp is really good with spatulas because you can build both Edgelord and Luchadors, and it really helps you fit the whole team one level earlier. If you hit an early Braum, this is also viable if you want to switch into it. Bastion Yasuo, this is such a fun build. Like, if you have plus range on Yasuo or if you have Bastion emblem, this becomes playable, and yeah, you definitely can just hard force it. Those are some like honorable mentions. Like, don't get confused though, because you only go for those if you get like a super start for them. So unless you get a super start for one of these comps, you are going one of these comps. That's my message for the day. I've seen some accounts, they have only played Star Guardian the entire patch and they're climbing. Like, it definitely is worth doing that. It might be boring, but like, if you want to climb at the end of the day, like sometimes really mastering one comp is the way to do it. Obviously, like if you want to become like super good, flexing is always going to be quote unquote optimal, but just because something is optimal doesn't mean you can do it, which is why forcing 1 or 2 comps is very popular in TFT. So depends what you want to do. If you want to get immediate results, then yeah, force 1 comp. If you want to get a bit more long-term results, then I suggest kind of like trying different things and learning more about the game. But the choice is yours. A choice you do not have though is not going to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta and not subscribing if you are not already. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, let me know down in the comments or in the Discord channel. Links are in the description below. And apart from that, I will see you all next time.